Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell, the Florida State Seminoles kicking off their spring game Saturday afternoon. And this is a spring game that I'm really excited for. And quite frankly, a program that is really getting slept on heading into 2024. A lot of the casual college football fans, the national media pundits, kind of assuming this Florida State program going to take a step back when you look at guys, Jordan Travis, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Jared Verse, Trey Benson, all going to the NFL draft. And I think a lot of Florida State fans are sitting there and saying, this is probably the deepest team that we have had seen since Mike Norvell has taken over in Tallahassee. And although you're not going into the 2024 season with those clear NFL standouts, you're probably going to see some of those guys really emerge and put a stamp on what they are going to mean to this program heading into 2024. Fired up to get into this one. Want to talk about a preview, some kind of storylines that we're looking for, and also kind of take a stab at some breakout players that are going to emerge Saturday afternoon. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. Shout out, as always, to the Florida State fans. Y'all continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section regarding who your breakout players are going to be. And this is one of those spring games that, with a lot of returning production, or a lack thereof, I should say, of returning production, you're kind of going to have some guys really step out and break out. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with, on the offensive side of the football, what are we looking for from this Florida State program? I think it starts with DJU, and I think what I'm most excited for is kind of see how they use DJU in this Florida State offense. I think partially really what makes Mike Norvell so great as an offensive-minded coach is he's brilliant at using his players and putting them in certain positions for them to be successful, right? You look at Jordan Travis, he molded an offense that really fit exactly what Jordan Travis could do well, what he couldn't do well. And in turn, you saw an offense that was extremely productive in 2023. DJU comes in with a little bit of a different skill set, and I think you're going to see some fundamental changes to the offense. And Mike Norvell and this offensive staff really kind of cater the offense in terms of what does DJU do well. And one thing we know he does well is push the ball down the field. And you look at the wide receivers and say, we have so much playmaking and explosiveness in that wide receiver room, whether it is blazing speed, whether it is big bodies. I am interested to see if Florida State really looks to attack the deeper third with a really big armed quarterback and wide receivers that really can work vertically down the field. You look at this wide receiver room, and this is kind of where I'm going to take a stab at some of my breakout players. You got a lot of different kind of bodies. And I think what's so exciting about this spring game is a lot of people sleep on this Florida State wide receiver room. Because again, on paper, there's not a ton of returning production coming back or coming into this program. But Florida State fans are sitting there saying, we got 6 or 7 guys that we feel really good about heading into 2024. This is their opportunity to really kind of take over that wide receiver room. Now, my prediction heading into Saturday afternoon, Malik Benson, I think, emerges as that true wide receiver one. I think, quite frankly, and this is saying a lot because you got guys like Hakeem Williams who are supremely talented. I think Malik Benson might have the highest ceiling out of all Florida State wide receivers. You combine the big frame with the elite 10-4 in the 100-meter dash. This is a guy that checks all the boxes that you're looking for in a wide receiver one. I am extremely excited to see if Malik Benson can kind of take all those physical traits that we've talked about the last couple of weeks and really put it on the field for Florida State. Malik Benson, probably my first breakout candidate. And I'm also going to go with Hakeem Williams. This was a guy that, coming out of high school, we kind of knew would need a year to really kind of harness his skill set. Going into 2024, this was the year where we said Hakeem Williams is going to break out, and you're going to see all those physical traits kind of come to fruition. So Malik Benson, Hakeem Williams, those are probably my 2 guys that I'm most intrigued at. But I know a lot of people like Kentron. I know a lot of people like Destin Hill, who unfortunately is banged up. I think it's such a talented room. I think we're all looking forward to seeing, all right, how does this wide receiver room really shake out heading into 2024. You look at the running back room, I think you know what you have with Roydell Williams. I think a lot of Florida State fans are obviously looking at Cam Davis, a guy that ever since coming out of high school, we knew could step on a college football field and be a guy. Personally, I'm most intrigued with Jalen Lucas. So you read the spring notes and say, all right, Jalen Lucas seemingly just dominating the spring practice window for Florida State. Another example of a unique skill set in Jalen Lucas, who can kind of do a lot of different things, going into a Mike Norvell offense, who we just said knows exactly how to cater offenses and cater, I guess, particular players and kind of scheme them into an offense. A guy like Jalen Lucas is one of those guys that I think Mike Norvell and this offensive staff are absolutely going to have a field day in terms of how they decide to use them. And I think the last storyline we're all looking at is the offensive line. And this is where I think, why am I so optimistic about Florida State heading into 2024? One, it sounds like they're finally healthy on the offensive line, which is drastically different from what we saw in 2023, where it seemed like every single game they played, they had guys who were probably 70% at best. But this is also an offensive line that is a lot deeper than it was last year, right? You had guys like Richie Leonard, TJ Ferguson. With Florida State, their goals are to win in November, right? Win ACC championships, go to the college football playoffs, and be a national championship contending team. And I think to be able to be dominant in those late parts of the season, you got to be deep, especially along the line of scrimmage. And I think Florida State is really deep there. This is probably the best offensive line room we've seen in terms of guys that give you a really, really high floor. You kind of know what they're going to be, but also some guys like TJ Ferguson who probably give you a little bit of a higher ceiling than you had in Florida State the past couple of years. My eyes will be on the offensive line. And then you scroll to the defense, and I think my number one thing that I'm looking for is how are we using these edge rushers and what are we trying to do and kind of what is the combination of edge rushers? I look at it and say, you got 4 edge rushers who I absolutely love, right? Patrick Payton, Marvin Jones Jr., those guys are kind of your Ferraris. Those guys are going to challenge tackles athletically, attacking that outside shoulder. And then you have guys like Tamiwa and Sione Lolea who are, for lack of better terms, just Mack trucks. They're going to go right through tackles. What is the combination? How do they use those 4 edge rushers and kind of scheme them up to be dominant? That's where my eyes will be. And then on the inside of the defensive line, it does sound like Florida State, after that week ban of the transfer portal, they're going to be active in addressing the inside of that defensive line. But you got some guys who I think are starting to hit their stride, right? Joshua Farmer, by far the best season we saw in 2023. Can he kind of stack that and add to it in 2024? Darrell Jackson Jr. getting inserted back into the lineup. Grady Kelly coming in the portal. What does the depth look like on the inside of the defensive line? And how dominant can we be up there? You move to the linebackers, and we've had a lot of back and forth with a lot of Florida State fans, and I don't want to get my message misconstrued in terms of, yes, do I have the most amount of question marks about this Florida State program at the linebacker spot? Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of Florida State fans probably second that. That's not necessarily me saying Florida State's not going to be good there, right? We know what DJ Lundy is. We don't have many question marks there. Sean Murphy, a guy that certainly could be an answer. A guy like Blake Nicholson certainly could be an answer. I'm looking at how do they look during this spring game, and that'll give us an answer in terms of, does Florida State need to address that linebacker room in the transfer portal, right? The progression of young guys. Sean Murphy, a guy that, from a physical trait standpoint, might be your most talented linebacker in that room. But can he put it together? Can he show the instincts? Can he be a guy that you can rely on in 2024? My eyes will probably be mostly on the linebackers. Then you look to the secondary, and it's kind of just pick your poison. Like, this is, in my mind, one of the best secondaries in the country. I think it's headlined by probably one of the best cornerback duels in Fentrell and Azariah Thomas. You look at the safety position, Devontae Brown making that switch. I personally think Conrad Hussey is going to take over that safety room. Devontae Brown, probably a little bit more of a depth piece. I'm interested to see that nickel role where Greedy Vance Jr. hit the portal. That probably says something about Earl Little Jr. and being a guy that really steps into that nickel role at the secondary spot. I don't have many question marks if it's going to be good. I think it's more who's going to be the guys in that Florida State secondary room, and that is, you have a lot of talented guys coming in as true freshmen as well. If you look at this Florida State team, going into the spring game and say, yeah, kind of circling back to where we started, there's going to be a lot of college football fans that doubt this Florida State team because there's not a ton. They lose a lot of NFL draft talent. So on paper, a lot of the casual fans that maybe don't follow the recruiting trail in the portal look at this program and say they're going to take a step back from 2023. I look at this Florida State team and say, yeah, I do agree. There is not the premier NFL draft guys like Jared Verse and Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, et cetera, right now. But you look at this team and say, yeah, okay, so we lost some proven production. We got a lot of young guys that are going to have an opportunity to step up during this spring game. That's where my eyes are going to be. 4 o'clock Eastern time, ACC Network. We'll hop on right after the game, kind of break down what we saw. Y'all know I'm fired up for it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Would love to hear some of your breakout performers. I didn't give you guys my breakout performers on the defensive side of the football. I'm going Conrad Hussey, Earl Little Jr., 2 guys that both going into, both young players going into year 2 or year 3. I think they really take over some of those spots in that secondary room. Those are where my eyes are going to be on. Would love to hear some breakout performers guys as well. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.